Prologue. The weight of stone. Jerusalem was a city of stone, and stone casts the longest shadows. In the narrow, winding alleys of the lower city, away from the glittering gold of the Temple Mount, lived Malachi. He was a master stonemason, a man whose hands were perpetually coated in the fine, gray dust of his trade. While others built grand palaces or bustling marketplaces, Malachi's life's work was hidden away from the sun. He crafted tombs. He spent his days in the cool, damp dark of limestone caves, carving out resting places for the wealthy elite of Judea. His chisel struck the rock with a rhythmic, hollow echo, a heartbeat of stone. Malachi was a man who understood shadows. He knew how they stretched at dusk, how they hid the flaws in a rough-hewn wall, and how they eventually swallowed every man, beggar and king alike. He believed that everything beautiful was eventually buried. But Malachi did not yet know that true light cannot be contained by stone, nor can the greatest work of art remain forever in the dark. Chapter 1. The Artisan and the Carpenter. The air in the marketplace was thick with the scent of roasted lamb, cumin, and unwashed bodies. It was the week before Passover, and the city was swelling with pilgrims. Malachi had emerged from the necropolis to purchase new iron chisels. It was there, amidst the chaotic symphony of haggling merchants and bleating sheep, that he first saw him. He was a carpenter from Nazareth, they said. His name was Jesus. Malachi watched from the periphery, lingering in the shade of a linen merchant's awning. He expected another loud, zealous rabbi shouting fire and brimstone. Instead, he saw a man with rough, calloused hands, hands like his own, hands that knew the splinter of wood and the unyielding nature of the earth. Jesus was speaking to a small crowd, his voice carrying a quiet authority that cut through the market's din. "Destroy this temple," the Nazarene said, gesturing toward the magnificent structure of Herod, "and in 3 days I will raise it up." The crowd scoffed, murmuring about the 46 years it took to build the temple. But Malachi felt a strange chill run down his spine. As a mason, he knew the impossible weight of those stones. Yet, looking into the carpenter's eyes, Malachi saw a kingdom not made of mortar and limestone, but of spirit and truth. For a fleeting second, the carpenter's gaze met Malachi's in the shadows. There was no judgment in that look, only a profound, piercing understanding. It was as if Jesus was looking straight past the dust on Malachi's skin, right down into the hollow, uncarved places of his soul. Chapter 2. The Secret Commission. Months bled into years, and the carpenter's following grew. So, too, did the whispers of rebellion, heresy, and danger. Malachi retreated further into his work, seeking the quiet predictability of the dead over the turbulent storms of the living. Late one evening, under the cloak of a moonless night, a knock came at Malachi's heavy wooden door. It was Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent and wealthy member of the Sanhedrin. Joseph's face was drawn, deeply lined with an unspoken anxiety. "I need a tomb, Malachi," Joseph whispered, stepping quickly inside to avoid being seen. "A new one, cut into the rock in the garden near Golgotha." "For whom?" Malachi asked, wiping chalk from his hands. "You are in good health, Joseph." "It is a precaution," Joseph replied, his voice trembling slightly. "It must be perfect, it must be pure, and it must be finished quickly, before the Sabbath of the Passover." Malachi accepted the heavy purse of silver. He did not ask further questions. For the next fortnight, Malachi worked feverishly in the garden quarry. He worked mostly at night, guided by the flickering, dancing light of oil lamps. He carved a smooth, cold slab of limestone, a bed for a king. He painstakingly shaped the massive, circular rolling stone that would seal the entrance. He was crafting a masterpiece in the shadows, entirely unaware of the divine purpose for which it was destined. Chapter 3. The Deepest Shadow. Friday. The sky did not just darken. It seemed to bruise, turning a sickly, violent shade of purple and black by the 6th hour. Malachi stood on the outskirts of the crowd at the place of the skull. The air was unnaturally still, heavy with a terrifying anticipation. On the center cross hung the carpenter. His back was torn, his flesh beaten beyond recognition, his blood dripping onto the very limestone bedrock that Malachi knew so well. Malachi watched the men who had mocked the carpenter's teachings now gamble for his garments. He heard the agonizing, labored breaths. He saw the mother weeping at the foot of the wood. This is the end of all things, Malachi thought, his heart turning as heavy and cold as the monuments he built. The light of the world is bleeding out into the dirt. When Jesus cried out, "It is finished," and bowed his head, the earth violently convulsed. Malachi was thrown to his knees as the limestone cracked and shuddered beneath him. It was the deepest shadow Malachi had ever known, a spiritual darkness that threatened to crush the breath from his lungs. The Roman centurion standing nearby whispered, "Truly, this was the Son of God." Malachi could only stare. The hands that were meant to heal were pierced. The man who spoke of living water was dead of thirst. Chapter 4. Sealing the Light. Before the sun could fully set and the Sabbath begin, frantic footsteps approached Malachi in the garden. It was Joseph of Arimathea, accompanied by Nicodemus. They were carrying a body wrapped in a linen shroud, heavy with 100 pounds of myrrh and aloes. "The tomb, Malachi," Joseph gasped, tears cutting through the dust on his face. "Is it ready?" Malachi's breath hitched as he realized who the tomb was for. He nodded silently and led them to the cavern he had carved in the shadows. He watched as they gently, reverently laid the broken body of the carpenter onto the pristine stone slab. The scent of the burial spices was overpowering, sweet, pungent, and steeped in finality. They stepped out into the twilight. "Help me," Joseph ordered softly. Malachi placed his rough, dust-covered hands against the massive, circular stone he had carved. With a grueling, collective heave, the men rolled the heavy rock down its groove. It fell into place with a deafening, final thud. Malachi stood before the sealed tomb. He had spent his life building houses for the dead, but this felt different. He felt a crushing guilt, a bizarre sense of complicity. He had built the cage that now held the light of the world. He walked back to his home in the pitch black of night, his soul utterly desolate. Chapter 5. The Shattered Shadows. The first day of the week dawned with a fragile, pale pink light over the horizon. Malachi had not slept. He found himself wandering aimlessly, his feet carrying him back toward the garden, toward the epicenter of his grief. As he approached, the earth trembled once more, not with the violent terror of Friday, but with a deep, resonant rumble, like the waking of a sleeping giant. Malachi broke into a run. When he reached the garden, he froze. The Roman guards were scattered on the ground like dead men, their armor gleaming dully in the early morning dew. And the stone, the massive, unyielding stone that Malachi had crafted with his own hands, the stone that required 3 men to move, was thrown back. He approached slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. He stepped to the threshold and peered into the shadows he had so carefully carved. The tomb was empty. Only the linen cloths remained, folded neatly, a silent testament to a departure that defied logic, defied physics, and defied death. The morning sun breached the horizon, sending a brilliant, blinding shaft of golden light directly into the heart of the cave. The shadows inside did not just recede, they were obliterated. Suddenly, Malachi understood. The stone slab he had carved wasn't a place of final rest. It was a chrysalis. It was the anvil upon which death itself had been broken. Jesus had not been defeated by the darkness. He had entered the deepest shadow to conquer it from the inside out. Epilogue. Children of the Light. Decades later, Malachi was an old man. His hands were gnarled, his eyesight fading. Yet the people of the early church in Jerusalem knew him well. He was no longer the man who lived in the necropolis. Malachi had abandoned the crafting of tombs. Instead, he built homes, he carved cornerstones for places of worship, and he taught the young apprentices how to build structures that let the sunlight pour in. When believers gathered in secret to break bread and drink the cup, they would often ask the old mason to tell his story. He would hold up his scarred, calloused hands and speak of the carpenter. "We are all born in the shadows," Malachi would whisper, his voice echoing in the quiet rooms of fellowship. We spend our lives carving out our own tombs, terrified of the dark, thinking that stone and wood are the final masters of our fate. He would smile, a tear catching in the deep wrinkles of his weathered face. But I tell you this, the creator of the universe allowed himself to be crafted in our shadows. He took our wood, our nails, our stone, and our darkness. He let us seal him away. And then, with the dawn, he shattered it all. He turned the grave into a doorway. Malachi would look at the faces of the faithful, illuminated by the flickering oil lamps, and finish his tale. Do not fear the dark, my friends, for the light has conquered the stone, and the shadows have nowhere left to hide.